Connect Southwest. What a beautiful day, right? Well, Visit Oakland is always a proud partner of Connect, and we're really, really excited to have Lynne Wellish come and present Could You Do Just One More Thing? That's the story of all our lives, correct? If you don't already know, Oakland is in Northern California. We're really most central location in Northern California, and also known as the sunny side of the bay. I have some destination guides on the table. That's actually part of our new marketing, our new look that we're doing, and be on the lookout for our new website, which is on 12/12/17. So without further ado, I'd like to present Lynne Wellish.
Thank you, Ronnie. Thanks for hosting this morning. Thanks, Angie, for having me back. You all doing okay? Wasn't last night awesome? I thought it was so awesome. All right, so I'm going to ask everybody, it's early in the morning, I'm not an early person, can you raise your hand? Just raise it. Can you raise it higher? 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 Okay. Now can you just give me 1/4 more inch? All right, great, thank you. Put your hands down. So how did that feel when I asked you to do just one more thing? I asked you to give me just 1 more 1/4 inch, and everybody in here was happy to do it, happy to comply, right? It was easy. But when you're working out in a meeting or an event and somebody says, can you do just one more thing? How does that make you feel? Right? Do you feel empty? Do you feel drained? Do you feel like you have nothing left to give? Does everybody ever feel that way? So, according to Julia Rutherford Silver, now she wrote a book called Professional Event Coordination, and that's the book I teach out of when I teach at Scottsdale Community College. And according to Julia, scope creep is when the scope of a project creeps outward past the boundaries that you've already established. Has that ever happened to anybody in this room? Anybody want to share? We'll get to that in a minute. So it recently just happened to me. I was working on a project for someone. It wasn't a meeting. It was part of a meeting. And I read the contract in one way, and she was a very good contract writer. She wrote it in another way. So I reread the contract, and by gosh, Nora was right. It wasn't the way that I thought it was written. You know, I have rosy thinking. So I was reading through that contract and looking at the scope of work, and there was a great clause in there. It said, a 30-day notice can be given by either party to cancel this contract with no penalty. And so that's what I did. I gave her my 30-day notice. So that would be a good hint for you to maybe write down when you're doing a scope of work for someone to make sure that you're both on the same page. So let's look at the anatomy of an event. So there's 6 dimensions to an event. The first dimension of the 6 dimensions is anticipation. So who in here has ever gotten like an invitation to an event, or you got an email, or maybe you got an email to come to Connect, and you got so excited? Anybody ever do that? You put it on your bulletin board, you start looking forward to it, maybe it's a wedding. And then the next dimension, the second dimension of the 6 dimensions is arrival. So you get to the event, and maybe there's bagpipers there. You know, I'm in Phoenix, so we have Native American flute players. Maybe there's those big sky trackers that are beckoning you to come in. Maybe it's an incentive trip, and you're at the airport, and there's a sign, and it says, hello, Mr. and Mrs. Incentive Winner. Here's your limo to take you to your fabulous resort destination. Or maybe you're like me, and you have clients with very small budgets, and so you call all your friends' kids, they get out their phones, and you rent a red carpet. The third dimension of the 6 dimensions of the event is the atmosphere. So we as meeting and event professionals, we design the atmosphere that we want our participants to engage in, right? Is it going to be like this, a learning session? Is it going to be a workshop where you're going to learn how to do something? Is it going to be a gala awards? Right? Or maybe it's going to be a team building event. So what tools are you going to use to craft that experience? So when that participant arrives, they're going to say, yes, the invitation matches the arrival, matches the atmosphere. The fourth dimension of the 6 dimensions of events is appetite. Now who is here? We are all food and beverage people, right? So we are all thinking about, what are we going to eat next? Has anybody here ever done Native American festivals? So the one thing they always have at Native American festivals is fry bread and Navajo tacos. So I've done a lot of Native American festivals in my life, and whenever Dennis from the Silver Hogan pulls in, I run out to greet him because I can taste that in my mouth already before I get there. And he always says, Lynn, it's going to be 3 hours before you can eat. But I am so excited to eat that Navajo taco, I can't even wait that long. Then the fifth dimension of the 6 dimensions of event is your activities. So what activities do you plan for your participants, right? Today you almost have to have a photo booth to be legitimate. You can have character artists. Has anybody ever seen pixel paint? So it's digital painting on a screen and then you take a picture of it. It's a fantastic interactive engaging opportunity that you can do for your participants, and it's high tech and it's very easy to do. You can do it as a template for your event. And then the 6th dimension is amenities. So when I teach, I tell my students, go ahead and start with your amenity, because that's all people are going to have left over when your event is over. They're going to be their memory piece. That's what's going to add legs to your event and make it a longer memory in your mind. Anybody have any questions so far? So when somebody says, can you do just one more thing, you have to keep those 6 dimensions in mind. Those are going to be the memories and experiences your participants are going to engage in, and that's where you need to utilize your resources to get your best ROI for you. So when you're driving down the road and you see a cone, think about me. And think about, you have to put boundaries around everything to keep you focused in the right direction. It's so easy to get off track and to spend your hours and your time working on something that's really not going to impact the participant's experience. So I'm going to tell you a story about a client of mine named Keith, and maybe you had a client like this before in the past, or you'll know somebody like this. So Keith was the VP of marketing for a Fortune 500 company, and no matter what proposal I gave him, he always made changes to it. Anybody ever have a client like that? Right? So one day I realized, wow, the meeting planner works for Keith. She's in the marketing department. It's his budget. He wants to just put his thumbprint on it to make sure that it's the way he wants it to be. So we were at a meeting, and Keith was planning a fabulous event. It was 300 people, national sales meeting at the beautiful Radisson Fort McDowell. If you've ever been out there, it's so fabulous. And he said, Lynn, I have found this wonderful thing. They're called bola bolas. They are name tags that look like bolo ties. And I said, Keith, that is fabulous. Do you know that? Amy's seen them. So I said, Keith, I will research that. He goes, Lynn, can you imagine when they go back to England and they have that bolo, they're going to have that name tag and it's going to be 2 things at one. How fabulous. So I did. I researched it. I spent 3 weeks and 21 hours, and I called Keith back and I said, Keith, I have that information on those bolo ties. Guess what he said to me? Anybody want to guess? He said, right, exactly. He said, Lynn, that was so 3 weeks ago. I said, oh, wow. I said, I want those 3 weeks and 21 hours back. Imagine what I could have done on that program with that time. Has anybody ever had an experience like that? Do you want to share? No? Anybody want to share? Normally I say, if your client's in the room, use the names Ruth or Naomi. All right, so that happens to us, right? It happens frequently. You spend your time working on someone only to realize they've changed their mind. I had another client who the meeting planner and I would be working on something, and the CEO would go on a trip. Well, he used to go into the Admiral lounges of American Airlines, and he'd sit at the bar, and he'd say to the other person sitting there, been to any good places for your meetings? And he'd go, yeah, Whistler. That CEO would come back, no matter what we were working on, they were now going to Whistler, right? So this happens to us all the time. Anybody else have an experience like that? Excellent. So remember, when somebody says, can you just do one more thing, you need to look and remember, you're here and you need to have those boundaries to keep you set in. So when they say, can you just do one more thing, again, think back to those 6 dimensions of the event and how that's going to impact the participant's experience. So maybe this has happened to you. You're in your office, you probably haven't been there for a few days, and you're like, I have the whole afternoon free. I am gonna return 5 or 6 emails, do 4 or 5 proposals, maybe catch up on a little gossip, and then the phone rings, and it's the easy client, and he says, you need to get down here right away. And you're thinking, why? You're the easy client. He goes, we have lots of things to talk about. So you grab your assistant, and as you're driving there, you're thinking, this was the easy client. I gave him a bundle deal, I gave him a smoking deal, it wasn't supposed to be so much work. And you get there, and the easy client says, well, we need to add 20 or 30 more social posts. Oh, and you did that proposal for our gala event, that needs to be revised. And you're thinking, for the 7th time. And as you're driving back to the office with your assistant, trying to figure out what happened, you realize you've been hijacked by the scope creep. So today we're going to talk about scope creep. I'm going to teach you 3 ways to use it to your advantage. I'm going to teach you 5 new resources to add to your to-do list as it keeps growing. And I'm going to teach you to triage an event, to determine the best plan of action based on the eternal dilemma, quick, cheap, or right. But how many can you have? Does anybody know? You can only have 2. You can't have all 3. So my friend Kate is in our industry, and maybe you have a friend like Kate. She's been very, very successful. She owns 3 or 4 businesses. So Kate, one of her businesses is a DMC. Anybody work for a DMC or use DMCs? Right, so she was doing a fabulous event. In Phoenix, we have a fabulous venue called Corona Ranch. Has anybody ever been there? It's fabulous, fabulous venue. So Kate was doing an event there, and her client kept telling her it was 800 people. 800 people, 800 people, 800 people. 3 weeks before the event, the client called Kate and said, Kate, I'm down to 400. So who knows what I'm thinking? You've got to call the caterer, the bartender, Tequila Sheila, the cigar rollers, right? You got to cut back on your Western games, transportation, table linen, centerpieces. So Kate calls Ashley in and she says, Ashley, I need you to contact every vendor and ask them to go back to 400. So Ashley did. Now today it's not like when I started out where you could just make a phone call. Today you have to what? Call, what else do you have to do? Email, what else? Text, right? Some people even Skype or they do Messenger. So Ashley did all that. She spent 3 days, and then Kate sent a bill to her client for that extra time. Because in her mind, that was above the original scope of the work. So the client called Kate back and said, are you nuts? I gave you my guarantee 3 weeks early. So who thinks Kate was right to bill for the time? Right? And then who thinks that Kate was not right? That it was part of the scope of the work? See, different people, different ways. I have no opinion. But things like this happen to us all the time, don't they? So you think that you're doing one thing and it turns out the scope of work is in another way. Does anybody want to share a time that happened to them? So I will tell you now about my least favorite client. His name is Sean. And we were doing an event at the beautiful Scottsdale Princess Resort. The theme was Desert Breezes. And that was 600 people, and I'm going to tell you a story about that in a minute. 600 people. But we were doing Native American artisans. So I had a sand painter and a silver artist and a rug weaver. And this client, Sean, he wanted, what is the spot time for talent usually before your event? Do they arrive usually about an hour before? Well, this guy, Sean, wanted them to come 2 hours before and then stay an hour afterwards because he didn't want any of his participants seeing them set up or tear down. So he was trying to get 3 additional hours out of that time that he was contracted for. So I was trying to explain to him that's above the normal scope of the work, but he didn't see it that way. So who agrees that it was above the normal scope? And who thinks that that was, a fair ask for your spot time? And see, we run into these challenges all the time, and we have to think about what is the best way to use our time and resources, and what's going to add to that participant's experience the most. So let's talk about the scope creep advantage. Who here has ever had a great idea that's been percolating in your brain and you're thinking, wow, this could not be a good idea because I'm thinking about it and nobody else has offered it up to as a solution for a challenge. Anybody have that happen? So it happens, the crisis happens, and you go to your boss and you say, hello, Mr. Bossman. I have a perfect solution for your challenge. And I'm going to tell you how easy it is to implement, and I'm going to show you how it's going to bring a return back to your investment. And so the boss says, go ahead. And so you do. You implement the solution, it works, and it shows the boss that you take initiative, you have creativity, you're not afraid to take risks, and you're a team player. And a lot of times when this happens, this adds a lot of value back to you, and it makes you, in the boss's eyes, easier to promote and easier to understand what's going on. Anybody want to share anything like that that's happened to them? Usually when I'm speaking to a group like this, somebody will raise their hand and say, oh, I had a great idea like that, and then my boss may pretend it was their idea. So who here's ever done a Western night? Western nights, right? In California, they're probably surf nights. All right, so when you did your Western night, who used a band? And who used a DJ? And then who did theirs inside? And who did theirs outside? And who had Western games? How about poker? Card gaming? And then how about, did you have steaks off the grill? Or was it inside with a buffet? So when I was presenting at Connect in New Orleans, this one woman said she did a murder mystery Western night and she did a seated plated meal. Now that I had not heard before. But all of these elements go into creating a fabulous experience for your participant. And you can see there's many, many ways to arrange them all together to have the same outcome of a fabulous Western night. I once had a client and she told me she had a limited budget, so we did spaghetti westerns on the wall, Clint Eastwood, and it was a fabulous effect. But then she gave everybody these $50 cowboy hats, and all I could think about was, how are they getting them home? So again, when somebody says, can you do just one more thing, think about how that resource, how those dollars are going to impact that participant's experience. So back to my friend Keith, we were doing a Western night for his sales meeting out at the beautiful La Puesta del Sol on the Fort McDowell Yavapai Nation. And we're setting up, and I've got a band of 6 pieces, and I've got Western games, and I've got steaks off the grill, and the CEO walks up to me and he goes, everything is so stellar. I go, thank you. He goes, I've decided to show the video I showed at the stockholders meeting. I said, excellent. So I'm outside during the day, and I'm like, wow, now I need to have a projector, I need to have an AV tech, I need to have a screen. So I said, you know, Mr. CEO, no problem at all. I'm going to go ahead and have you sign this. So this is an event change order. Does anybody use these with their clients? Do you want to tell us what you do? All right, so here, let me hand you the mic.
If something is over a certain amount, we make them sign a change order and it just updates the scope of work.
Excellent. So now you have actual documentation that that change was ordered. So I said, you know, Mr. CEO, I guesstimate this to be at about $2,500. Can I have you sign here? And he said, sure, no problem. So this happens a lot. Has anybody ever worked as a catering manager doing weddings? And then the father of the bride forgets that he said, yes, I'm going to extend the bar. So you can have him sign this. How about this? Have you ever done an award celebration for top producers and somebody says, oh, champagne for everyone? And then you can't, right? And you can't decide what's more shocking, that hotel had 30 bottles of chilled champagne ready to come out, or did that person have the authority to sign for that champagne and to order it? So immediately, you would go up and have them sign a change order. So at my event, which was all salespeople, the CEO came up and he goes, "Oh my gosh, Lynn, everything is so stellar, stellar, stellar. I would like to extend the badge for 1 more hour." And I said, "Sure, Mr. CEO, may I have you sign another event change order? And I guesstimate this one to be $3,000. So he said, "Sure, no problem." So now we're at $5,500 just from one event that's been approved on site that's beyond the original budget, right? So has this ever happened to anybody in the room? Who is now going to use an event change order, right? It helps you track things much better. So I think as meeting and event planners, these are the resources that we are sucked dry the most. Time is our currency. It's to us, sometimes it's more valuable than money, right? We schedule one meeting as we drive to another, we're on a phone call, we're always trying to do 2 things at one time. So time is our currency. Communications. Who does not have a problem communicating? So I have a friend and he taught me this one hint, and maybe this will help you. Whenever he's working on a meeting or an event, he opens up a closed LinkedIn group. And that way, the only people that can have access to that information are the stakeholders in that meeting or an event. So you don't get back to your office and have 25 messages in your email box because somebody hit reply all. People can look at it in their own time. You can add diagrams and floor plans for people to have input on. And again, you're not having to worry about it going into spam or somebody hitting reply all. Money you never have enough of, do you? But as I gave through my little talk about Keith and the CEO, they had money that the meeting planner didn't have access to. So I think that many times we make the mistake of judging others by our own pocketbook. And we have to realize that there's other little funds available. So who here was trained in their job? Right? A few of you. But most of you start a new job and don't you feel like you're on a scavenger hunt? Right? You're looking through the files. Maybe you can actually get on the computer. You're looking to see what's coming up next. Maybe the phone will ring. "Hi, it's Joe. How's my meeting in Sacramento?" "Oh my gosh, Joe, I'll get back to you." Then maybe your boss comes in and says, "Do you have that budget for that meeting in Salt Lake?" And suddenly you have 2 things to do, right? So you're learning on the job based on the questions people are asking you. Human resources, we never have enough of those. So I don't know if anybody in here knows Kathy Overcamp. She's the meeting planner for America West Airlines, well, American now. So when she was with America West, she was a client, and she was a one-man show. And she was so excited because she finally hired an assistant, Carrie O'Brien Rose. And after 18 months, Carrie too was at maximum capacity. So then I got lucky, they hired one of my students, Bree, and she worked there for 3 years before they moved to Dallas. Then there's serviceability. So who here has ever had a great idea that was a bad execution? So you think that this idea is going to really save you time and money or make it easier for you to transmit information, and it turns out to not work so well. That happens to me a lot. Then there's information. Now we all know that you think you're giving information, but maybe you're not giving the information that people are asking for. So maybe you can't figure out why your AV company keeps calling you because you gave them the timeline and the show flow for the event. But what they want to know is, who do I contact at the loading dock to set up the time to deliver my truck and have it park in your bay? And how long can it be there while I unload? And what if I have 3 trucks to unload? So we need to be able to give people the information that they're looking for and not get frustrated that I've already sent that to you. And then trends. Does anybody seeing any trends in our industry today? We're seeing no more bottled water, that's gone. We're seeing lots of vegan and vegetarian options. Lots and lots of gluten-free. Anybody else want to say a trend that they're seeing? Technology. That is coming faster and faster than I can even learn it. Lots of apps coming up. I was speaking in Tallahassee, Florida, and they were doing me on Facebook Live. I still don't know what that is, but it looked great. Right, so there's lots and lots of technology coming up, and right now it's a seller's market, right? So they're looking at revenue management before they book your group into the hotel, very short lead times, not much negotiation in your contracting, not much on your concession list. Anything else?
No. On the gift side, doing more like shopping experiences or offering an online website where they can select their gift before the event and it goes directly to their house.
So that's excellent. So Jennifer was saying online shopping so you can pre-order your gift before you come so it goes to your house. I have a friend, Jamie Cook, she does so many incentives. And they do that. They have like a whole plan of things. So if people are going to Fiji, they start out sending them sunglasses. Then they get flip-flops, right? Then they get a bathing suit. Then they get a towel. Then they get suntan lotion. So all those things are great, and they're all customized too. Much more customization. So when I was doing research on this project, I met a guy named Mike Ingardia, and he told me, Lynn, projects never go over budget. It's the task to complete those projects that go over budget. And that is the crux of what I'm saying today. Projects never go over budget. It's the tasks that complete them. So when somebody says, could you do just one more thing, you have to look at your resources, your team, and see where their time is being delegated to see if you can add just one more thing. Because you're definitely adding it to you as the project manager, but you might be adding it to another employee as well. And so this is something that I wished I would have learned when I was a lot younger. Has your boss ever called you in and said, we're planning a meeting in Vancouver, and this is what I see, and this is the budget? And then when you walk out, you don't know if you should be laughing or crying, because there's just no way they're going to get everything on that wish list. So I wish I would have learned this when I was much younger, like I said. So my solution to this is you come up with 2 proposals. The first one, you do everything they ask for. You don't ask your suppliers for any pricing or discounts. You let them see the actual real number of what it is that they want. Then you do the second proposal, and you let them have what they can have for that budget. And then you put it on their desk or email it to them and wait for that boss to direct you. Because what you're going to do is save yourself a lot of time and energy, and you won't need to go into that negotiating process until they come back with a different budget. So has that ever happened to anybody in here? Right? I think this is a really good tool. So I told you about my least favorite client, Sean. So we were out at the beautiful Scottsdale Princess Resort. They used to have this fabulous cookout area called the Crown Peak Corral. And maybe there's a hotel that you love that has a fabulous cookout area too. And I was doing ecru and sage and sienna tablecloths, and I had little cocopellis and cactus gardens for my centerpieces, and then a few cowboy hats with chrysanthemums coming through. And sure enough, I'm in my office, and my linen vendor calls me, and she says, hi, it's Linda, I'm around the corner. I'm like, sure, come on down, right? I'm in sales, I'm all about FaceTime. Don't you like to have FaceTime with your clients? So she walks in, and she is so happy, and she's got this little white box, and she's jingling it around, and she says, this is going to make the tablescape of your event so much better. Now, my event is outside at night, and she opens it up, and they're beautiful silver, turquoise, and mother-of-pearl napkin rings. They look just like Native American jewelry. And I said, these are beautiful, Linda. How much are they? And she said, $8. So I'm thinking $8 times 600 people is what, 4,800? Then you've got to pay someone to put them out, clean them up, and then you've got to pay for anything that are missing. So then I start thinking, what can I do for $5,000 that's going to really make an impact on everybody attending this fabulous event? And then it hit me. Native American hoop dancing. Has anybody ever seen Native American hoop dancing? If not, definitely look it up. So I called Derek Davis, 7-time world champion, Native American hoop dancer, and I said, hey, Derek, are you available this night? He said, Lynn, I am. I'm like, yes. I I said, how much is it? So he told me, and I thought, I still have almost half my money. I said, will you do 2 performances? He said, I will. I'm so excited now. I said, Derek, what would make it a better performance? He said, I'm going to bring my 8-year-old son, and you could do low light, fog, and laser beams, and laser lights, and it'd be really engaging. And so I did. I did not go with the napkin rings. I brought Derek Davis, 7-time Native American hoop dancing champion, with his son, with the laser lights and the low light and fog, and I guarantee you, everybody that was there that night still remembers that Native American hoop dancing. But do you think anybody would have remembered that napkin ring? So you have to think about what is going to leave the best experience and the best impression in your participant. What is the best use of your resources? So here's my invoicing tip. When I showed you about the change orders and I talked about the CEO, it clearly added up to $5,500. And that's a lot for my little business. So make sure that you invoice right away for your client. You don't actually have to send the invoice if it turns out to be a great day, or you do. And now you've got your documentation to back it up. So I think this is a great hint. Have you ever gone through a bill after you billed a client and realized you forgot to bill them for something? Right? And then you're a little embarrassed. You don't know if you should, definitely you should send it, but maybe it was a great client. Maybe it was a huge spend in your property, and maybe that $200 is really something that you should avoid. So has this ever happened to you? You're working with a client, and they're running late, and you walk into the room, and there's a bunch of people milling about, and they're eating muffins and donuts and coffee and bagels, and somebody walks in and they're like, hey you, where are we at on the speaker for Cincinnati? And what have you done about transportation in Ohio? And you better get on this. And then they leave the room and you're thinking, wow, this meeting hasn't started. It's already over and I'm not even in charge of any of those things. So my best solution for you is to always, always, always have an agenda. Anytime I chair any committee, I have an agenda. I send it out before the event, before the meeting, and I write tasks and timelines and who's responsible for what. I also take minutes from the last meeting, and I send those out as well. And I'm very, very sneaky, because even if you didn't come to my meeting, that doesn't mean you're not going to be in the minutes and assigned a task. So that way people will have to look through the minutes. This is going to make your meetings be more organized and more productive. So again, always, always have an agenda and always, always send out minutes so people will know who's responsible for what. So here's some new resources. Who's recently bought technology for your office, for your business? Anybody? And it's very important to buy the training that goes with it. Has anybody ever taken Jim Spellos' Excel class? So I think I've taken that about 5 times, and when I learned you could split cells and merge cells and freeze panes, that saved me so many hours, countless times. So you can be out of the office for a day for the training. Again, we're always short on staff, so I suggest using volunteers or retired employees. So Kathy Overcamp with American Airlines, she uses an abundance of retired employees. They're meeting you at the car, they're directing you into the facility, they're directing you to the registration desk, and they're there walking around with a mic doing Q&A. All it costs her is a t-shirt and a lunch, but it brings back such a great return for her because the retired employees can catch up what's happening with the company, and the ones that are still working can see what it's like to be retired. And it's just a nice ambiance. It makes everybody feel involved. Internal resources. So my friend was the meeting planner for US Foods, and she was having a very busy time. In Arizona, it's pretty slow in June, July, and August. It's just too hot to do anything. So my friend went, and she was looking for someone to help her with some graphic design and a little bit of sourcing. So Human Resources said, we have an employee, Shelley. She'd be great at that. So my friend used Shelley, and then as soon as there was an opening in the meetings division, Shelley moved right in there because they were so thrilled with the work she's done. So maybe you can check in accounting or human resources or some other department that's a little bit slow. Then who uses interns? Anybody? I love interns. You know, as a teacher, I love interns. Younger people they don't know what's not going to work, they don't know what the rules are, and they're very, very, very up on technology. So they can create systems and design things in ways our mind can't piece together. Plus, they're so young and enthusiastic, they want to learn everything they can. They really want to make a great impression. And then outsourcing. And so many times when I say outsourcing, I see a lot of planners wince. Because they say, planning is my job, but actually it's your job to manage the project. Many times, if you just pick up the phone and call an independent planner, they might have resources you don't know about, and they might have pricing that you're not eligible for. So my friend Kate that I talked about before, when I worked at the Phoenix Zoo, she did not know you could have a behind-the-scenes tour of the zoo with a zookeeper. And so she could do that for her very VIP groups. There's other advantages, too, to outsourcing. The first one is that the person you're outsourcing to doesn't participate in meetings and office politics. They're only there to assist you with what your needs are, and you don't have to pay them any benefits. So I encourage you all to pick up the phone and make that call. It's like waving a magic wand, and all your problems are solved. Does anybody here outsource to other planners? No? Thought about it? So does anybody have any resources that I didn't talk about that you like to use or share? Yes?
LinkedIn. I needed a site visit in Montreal. I couldn't get up there myself for a restaurant offsite. And on LinkedIn, got someone and he went and I paid for his dinner and his time. And he said, no, don't go to this restaurant after all. And he took the time to go find the right one and booked it.
All right.
I never met him.
So Kevin said, and I had a similar experience, Kevin said he needed to do a site visit in Montreal. He couldn't take the time to go there. He looked on LinkedIn. He found someone in the industry. This person went to the restaurant. Kevin paid for his dinner. And his LinkedIn friend said, don't go there. So he took the time to research other places and then sent Kevin. So was it a good choice what he sent you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, great experience.
Thank you for sharing that. That's awesome. I had a similar thing. I needed transportation in Cleveland, Ohio. It's not like here in Palm Springs or in Arizona where you're used to transporting large groups. So I called a guy too from LinkedIn and I said, I can tell we know a lot of the same people and I'm hoping that you would be willing to help me. Would you be willing, I just need one, so it's not worth your time to do it. Would you be willing to tell me what transportation company you use? And so he did. He was very generous like that. That's a great resource. Anybody else have a resource you want to share?
We involve our DMCs and CDBs all the time. We involve our DMCs and our CDBs all the time.
So they help you with what you need? That is another great resource. CVBs are awesome. They already know what's out there, they know what's trending, and they know what's still open, right? Have you ever done that? You've researched a place only to find out they closed last year? Any other resources you want to share? I know a girl who always uses her son's Boy Scout troop to stuff packages and bags and swag. So triaging a request is when you determine the best plan of action based on the eternal dilemma, quick, cheap, or right, but you can only have two. So triage came out of the French Revolution War, and what it did was it helped determine which patients would have the best success based on the elements that they had there. So you're prioritizing everything. So when someone says, can you do just one more thing? You have to see how important that is in your dollars, in your cents, and in your participants' experience. It's so easy, as I talked about with Keith and his bola ties, it's so easy to get caught up in doing research for something, but you have to really decide if that's going to be worth it or not. So I like to suggest using a color code system. Does anybody use a color code system? So I worked for a woman, and we used ACT. That's how long ago it was. We used ACT as our contact management system, and my color was green. My husband's last name is Greenberg, and every day I'd walk in, and there I'd open my calendar, and I had all my tasks laid out for me. Now, I swore she got to work at 4 a.m., but she said it was 6. At 4 a.m. she was swimming. I was still sleeping. And I used to think, wow, Camille, you must think so highly of me that you think I can get all this done in one day. Because I guarantee you this is like a month's worth of work here. But I like to recommend a color code system for tasks. So if you remember back when I started out, we used to mimeograph BEOs and event orders. And so I go with that. If it's red, it has to be done in 4 hours. If it's orange, it needs to be done that day. If it's yellow, it needs to be done that week. If it's green, maybe that month. If it's blue, I'll get back to it when you get back to me. Has that ever happened? Somebody asks you to do something, and then you get back to them, and they're like, why are you calling me? Well, you asked about this. Oh, I don't remember that. Here, I'll send you the email. But you should just have, like, let it go, right? And then the next one is violet. And again, that's another one where you think, yeah, this might happen. When you get back to me, I'll think about it some more. And then maybe I'll think about it some more. And then the one below that, I call that my great ideas file. So when somebody says, can you just do one more thing? I'm like, that's a great idea. I'm going to put it in my great ideas file. And then one day when you need a great idea, you can open that file and maybe it'll inspire you. All right, does anybody have any questions, thoughts, feedback, input? This is your chance. Yes.
I'll give an example because there was a conference for about 600 and it happened to fall over Cinco de Mayo. And so they said, well, we have to show some attention to this. And so they found a kids dance group or a group of young children to dance and do a performance during the banquet. And they just love that idea and everything. And they come, but then on a very tight budget. Of course, the head person's like, well, if we have all these kids, we have to feed them dinner. And then what comes with 15 children? 15 parents. And then the parents, oh, there's a buffet. I'll go through the dinner. So, and I saw it as soon as it was happening. And they said, great, we found this group of kids. It's not gonna, they're just gonna come complimentary and, you know, thinking it was this inexpensive thing, but at $40 a person going through the buffet, it quickly, so they would have been better off hiring a professional entertainer.
Thank you. And that's a great story. I had a client once, and his meeting started at 8 a.m., and it was a sales meeting. And he wanted a full gospel choir to sing, to get everything, to get people up and moving at 8 a.m. And so we did that. We offered them a breakfast in the green room if they were there by 7. I never saw so many people in blue robes coming and singing for a free breakfast. But it was totally the right way to start that day. Anybody else? Thoughts, questions, feedback, comments? Okay, so today I taught you the term scope creep, and I taught you 3 ways to use it to your advantage. You think about the moment of truth when a crisis happens, you present your idea, then you bring a return back to the goals and objectives, and then it brings value back to your job performance. You're seen as a team player, not afraid to take initiative, to be creative, and not afraid to take risks. And those are all great characteristics for a leader to have. We looked at resources to help you. So there's technology and the training to use it, volunteers and retired employees, interns, internal resources, and then outsourcing. So when you hire someone without your company. And then I taught you to triage a request to determine the best plan of action, quick, cheap, or right, but you can only have 2. And in deciding that, you have to think about what leaves the best experience on your participant or your guest. So thank you for having me today. Keep in mind, scope creep, the uninvited guest, he's going to come back and visit you soon. Thanks for attending. And thank you so much, Ronnie, for sponsoring this morning.